Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Saga, where we discuss all those stories from the galaxy far, far away. I am David Cottingham here with Hannah Burr. How are you, Hannah, tonight?
I am doing well. How are you?
Good, good. In your new place now, right?
Yes, we just moved, so that stressful speed bump of life is now over.
That's right. Always good getting closer to work. It's yes. It's funny because I moved. It's funny because I used to live. This is totally inside baseball. No one's gonna understand this. But it's funny. I lived. You know what I'm talking about. I lived in Hamburg, which was about 25-30 minutes from the office. Right. I moved to Versailles, and it takes me a shorter time to get to work now.
That's insane because actually where we live now, don't get me wrong, it's shorter. I used to take 45-minute commutes to work, but now it takes about 15-20 minutes, and it's faster to drive through the center of Lexington than it is to drive around the city.
Totally. Absolutely. Yep.
So I totally get that.
Yeah. Anyway, nice for everybody to join us on this new episode of Beyond the Saga. We got an exciting one to talk about because the new show has debuted on Disney Plus, The Bad Batch, which I totally will forever say that this is basically season 8 of the Clone Wars.
Yes. Right. It's pretty obvious this is a continuation. It's not its own show at all.
No. I mean, the first thing you see is the Clone Wars logo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I feel like that's almost like this little lantern they're hanging up saying,
Totally.
What this is.
So what we wanted to dive into is a book that came out almost 6 years ago. And the reason why we wanted to talk about it is because the show, the very beginning of the Bad Batch, takes place on the planet Color, and it involved a young Padawan named Caleb Dume. And this shows a different point of view from Order 66, where you had Master Billaba and Caleb Dume experienced the turn of their clones against them. Well, this same scene or this same situation happened in a comic book called Star Wars Kanan back in 2015. Now, this came out about a year or shortly after, I think, the debut of the second season of Rebels. I could be wrong about that, but I think the first season had been out. And this was announced because the Marvel series of comics got reintroduced. You know, they grabbed hold of the publishing again from Dark Horse and reissued some issues. And this was one of the first ones that came out. I remember, you know, Star Wars came out, which is what we're covering now. Also, Vader came out, and then there was a couple of grouping, just. Short 6-issue run or 5-issue runs of like Leia, Chewbacca, and then this came out. Now this is it's a 12-issue run, so there's 2 volumes, and we're going to go over volume 1 right now, which is called Kanan: The Last Padawan. So written by Greg Weisman. It's issues 1 through 6, so we'll cover 7 through 12 here on another episode at some point. But I really wanted to dive into this and get Hannah's perspective, obviously, because, you know, again, as I watched The Bad Batch on May the 4th, as soon as this started coming out, I just immediately, my memories flooded back thinking, wait a minute, did I know I read this in that comic, and this doesn't seem like it's playing out the same way. Of course, the situation's the same, same planet and everything, but it was definitely different. So we definitely want to dive into that. But of course, before that, let's dive into our general overall review. So Hannah, you You just read this recently, and what are your overall thoughts of the issues?
Well, opposed to your experience, I actually had no idea this comic existed. Mm-hmm. So I watched Bad Batch first, and then I read this comic.
Interesting.
So it's a very different perspective because you're reading the comic going, is this really how it was supposed to go? How can I take what I watched and kind of cram it into my experience here? But compartmentalizing that and just putting that aside. While reading the comic, all I have to say is I have a greater appreciation for Caleb, Kanan. I have a greater appreciation for who he is. I have a greater appreciation of where he came from, what his struggles were. Because to me, watching Rebels, it was very much of, I feel like I've seen this before. The teacher who's constantly frustrated with the Padawan. The teacher who's like, oh, just trust me on this. But in this case, we actually get to see how that Padawan turned into a Jedi himself. Mm-hmm. So my overall takeaway of this first section is just, wow, I love this character so much more. And I appreciate and respect him so much more than what I see in Rebels, which is a big thing saying, considering what he went through that TV show. But initially, when you first meet him, it's just, wow. So I think while it is different, and I think we'll get to that eventually, discussing whether or not what's canon, what's not. If you just put Bad Batch aside, I think this will just help you understand where Caleb comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think I remember when I read it, I thought it was a great, back then when Rebels was still going on, I thought it was a great companion book to give you some, perspective on where Caleb has come from and where Kanan has come from, because, at the beginning of season 2, which I think is when I think season 2 had already debuted. I have to look that up, but I think it had debuted early, like September usually. And this comic actually came out during the summer. So if you read the issues, you read it before season 2. But this graphic novel came out, in November with that collection. So I read it when the collection came out. So I read it after season 2 started. And, in the first couple episodes of season 2, if you remember, that's when Kanan meets Rex and Wolf and Gregor, clones that had their chips removed. And I think we're going to get how Wolf and Gregor got their chips out here in this series.
I hope so.
But, he obviously had a major distrust of the clones, and rightfully so, right? He explains to Ezra in that episode how they turned on him, because Ezra doesn't know the story, obviously, of Order 66. And this clearly basically supported that story, right? What he went through with his master, the clones that turned on them. And like most episodes, or like most experiences with Order 66, we're seeing how the Jedi most of them had very close relationships with their clone commanders, right? Anakin, Rex, Obi-Wan, and Cody, and then now Ahsoka, absolutely. And now you see the relationship that Depa and Caleb had with Commander Gray in this book. I mean, there was that scene in the beginning of this book where they're sitting around that campfire and they're like a little family. You know what I mean?
That was great.
Yeah. So it's heartbreaking when you get those scenes and those emotions. And then, of course, when the clones just turn on them. Now, I will say, so overall, I love the book. And I will say one aspect of it that I don't want to give too much away, but one aspect of it that I thought really stood out, and again, you've seen this in the Clone Wars with in season 7, where we finally see the Order 66 come down with Rex. Basically the clone in this Gray, in this book, was conflicted. It just as Rex was when he didn't want to, he was shaking because he didn't know what he was doing really. So it's great to see that even though most of the clones, practically all of them, just followed the order and turned on the Jedi, but there were some that be it a malfunctioning chip or just the emotion was in their minds and their hearts were overcoming the order. It's good to see the humanity within them, and you really see that in this book with that. And I thought that was a really good part of it.
It absolutely was. And I think I can't tell you where I read this because I don't remember, but someone once suggested that whenever the Jedi are going, whoa, I feel so many screams of agony, so many screams of pain, one has to wonder, was at least a huge contribution of that were all the clones who immediately felt agony and were internally screaming in pain because they didn't want to do what they were programmed to do.
That's awesome to think about that. That is completely possible. Yeah, I totally feel that because, yeah, it's just like Rex, because you could clearly see it in that episode where he's trying to tell her, when he's like fine fives, and like help me get, because I don't want to do this, and that's phenomenal to think of. So, again, we don't want to give too much away because we do think people need to read this thing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think it's after the first 2 issues. Yeah, basically into the second issue is where it really, we see Kanan make those decisions on how to hide and get and not be found by the troopers that are the clones that are looking for him, and how he kind of gets into the lifestyle of hiding and whatnot. And so that's the great part of the book, is seeing how he becomes Kanan in a sense, right? But the first issue and a half, that's really what I want to focus on most, I think, because that is what's represented in the Bad Batch show. And I think it's good to talk about a little bit about what's different about it and maybe why they chose to do those things. So I think the biggest difference off the bat, I'll say the minor differences first. I think, the book has a night scene with the clones around the fire. Now, this is not to say that scene didn't happen, right? Could have happened the night before. But they get the order at nighttime in the book, where they get the order at the daytime. Of course, there's no Bad Batch in this book because here's the thing: is that they existed though, because he had those unfinished Clone Wars episodes prior to Rebels. So the Bad Batch was a thing then. It just wasn't obviously in this book. So I'm glad Caleb had that experience with them in the show. So I guess overall, Hannah, what do you think? Is it safe to say that one that watches the show and reads the comic, do you feel like they should pick one or the other, or do you think they should just settle on kind of the overall themes of both to establish what was canon?
I'm going to say the overall theme, and this is why, is that when you read the comic, it's very much from Caleb's point of view. Mm-hmm. It's very much it felt like a family. This was us sitting around the fire. This was fantastic. And then all of a sudden they turn on us because later on, Not going to spoil anything. He talks about being betrayed again.
Mm-hmm.
So betrayal is very important to the character of Caleb. Therefore, that the comics is very much from his perspective. Meanwhile, if you watch Bad Batch, it's from the clone's perspective. Because we've already, and that's what I think I love about the Bad Batch episode of that so much, is that we get the clone perspective of it. And you get the whole debate of that's an order versus that's not right. So you see that ethical dilemma. Meanwhile, in the comic, it was just, okay, all of a sudden they turned on us. But we see that so much. We saw that in Revenge of the Sith. We saw that in Clone Wars. We see that in the comic. Now we get the other perspective in Bad Batch. So I think it's just embracing that theme of seeing two sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
But the unique perspective of the Bad Batch is you have a group where the chip doesn't work. So they're dealing with like, whoa, why are you attacking me? And the other person's like, you stay away from me. So it's just a unique perspective. So that's why I think when you watch the show and watch the comic, you shouldn't focus on what's canon, even though I think arguably now we have to say that what happened in Bad Batch is technically canon.
Right.
You focus on the theme. You focus on the perspective of what's happening. And then you'll fully benefit from the story in both genres.
Yeah. 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 For me, I'm going to easily, because, we've seen this happen before, mainly with, it's happened a few times in small details, but mainly the biggest one has happened so far leading up to this, I think, was the Siege of Mandalore. And right, because that kind of retconned Ahsoka's novel, which described her conflict with Maul. Obviously, what's in the Clone Wars season 7 is canon. So it was, established then somewhat that, okay, if it happens on screen, it's pretty much canon. And the publishing side, unfortunately, kind of takes a backseat to that. Now, I will say, though, when that happened, the story group has come out and said some great things. And if you look at it this way, and I've said this before on other shows, so forgive me if people listening or watching have heard this, but it's good to note that when it comes down to things like this, think about it as Star Wars being we're not seeing real time Star Wars. We're seeing stories that were told years and years ago. Just like if you look back at our history, mankind's history, U.S. history, whatever, you, Hannah, may have experienced the Civil War one way. I may have experienced the Civil War another way. The way you tell your family how it went probably is different than the way I tell my family how it went, right? So if you think of Star Wars like that, where if you think of it like this is an event that happened a long time ago, and the stories that keep getting passed down about it, details are going to change. Is it nighttime? Is it daytime? Who shot first? Not literally who shot first with Han, but
I couldn't help but go with Han and Greed. I'm sorry.
But that's even a good example also. Like the main detail is that, Han and Greedo were sitting in a cantina. Who shot first? That's one opinions versus somebody else's, right? In this instance, it's the same thing. The situation is always going to be the same. Depa and Caleb were on Collar. They were fighting to liberate Collar. The clones got their order of 66. They turned on them. She got killed. He escapes. That's it. The details of all that, you can, at that point, actually, like you said, either just take those themes and go with it. But if you want to decide, it's up to you to say if you want the comic to be canon or if you want the show to be canon. It really doesn't change. You shouldn't change your enjoyment of the story. I guess the next question, though, beyond that is, at all, do you feel like either situation changes Kanan's personality or path at all?
I don't think so at all, because when you watch Bad Batch and when you read the comic, Kanan is still terrified of any clone trooper he sees.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that changes anything at all. He still, no spoilers, he still had to learn to survive. He still had to learn to take care of himself with the lack of training in that area. And he still went on the journey that he went on that brought him to where he is today. Would I like to see more of his story fleshed out in TV animated form? Absolutely, because when you read the I seriously don't know how they do it, but it feels like you're watching a screenplay or a TV script. The action is so good.
Yeah.
Comic book form. So would I love to see that? Absolutely. Do I think that changes his story? No, I don't, because he's still terrified of them. It would be one thing if, I believe it was Hunter, convinced him, hey, come here. I'm just here to protect you. I think that would be one thing. But the fact that he still ran from them, he still didn't trust them, that doesn't change his story. That doesn't change his background. If anything, it just reinforces that aspect of the comic.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's right. The bond that I feel like Caleb had with his clone commanders.
Oh.
In the comic, I think they tried to translate that to the Bad Batch in the show. Right, because it didn't seem like he was it didn't seem like he was as close to. Well, we didn't see it anyway. We didn't see the closeness with the commander there. But if you can remember his excitement on this new group of clones that were there, right? And
that's true.
I mean, they even invited him to go with them on that. He was following them into battle before the Order 66 happened. So. It's not that they were really close, but you can see that he was, Wrecker really liked him. And, obviously Hunter felt protective of him when this thing went down. So I thought that was a really good twist to his story.
It definitely was. But I think the other thing is now thinking more about his story and who he ends up working with. It might change.
It's possible.
I hope it doesn't, because I really like where the comic takes it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I love it so much. But it...
Yeah, it's true.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. Maybe we don't see him again, and therefore we can say the rest of the comic is canon.
That's right. Hopefully we can. I will mention that, when you look at the cover, all the clones that are around him are the red colored clones, which we know now, well, we've known for a while. These are actually the colors that the shock troopers wear, and those are more Imperial, not Imperial, but those are more Coruscant, part of the Coruscant Guard, which is what Hunter says when he first comes off the plane back on Camino in that first episode. So they did change the color of them in the show also, because they couldn't be the shock troopers. But in here they look like shock troopers and stuff. So anyway, but the biggest thing I will say, and we mentioned this before we started recording, I'm not sure why they changed her lightsaber color.
I'll be honest, when you mentioned that, I was like, wait, they did?
Mm-hmm.
But that's so fundamental to a Jedi, especially someone who's a part of the High Jedi Council.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. So I can't even begin to try to shoehorn an explanation in there. Unless you got do you have any ideas as to why?
No, because like I said, I think the clone the colors of the clone, the red, makes sense because you've established those as shock troopers and not really troopers with. So I understand you have to change their color, but and of course, daytime, nighttime. I don't care about that. But yeah, the fundamental color of her saber, I'm just not sure. I can't begin to think of an explanation of why they would change her color. Now, maybe it's because, well, no, I don't think so. Well, I'd have to look because I'm not sure if she was in episode 2. And was she at Geonosis at all? I don't know. Maybe her color was actually established there and the comic is wrong.
We're going to have to do more research about that.
We will have to do more research about that.
Or you can go ahead and comment below and let us know.
Very true. Yes. So maybe her saber was turned on during the films and maybe it was blue then. I don't know. I'd have to. In fact, I really literally just thought of that because that's the only explanation I can think of is that it was already established that it was blue somewhere and the comic is actually the wrong color. That would make more sense to me. But
more research is going to have to be done on that.
Absolutely. But anyway, that is our discussion really quick about the last Padawan there in Kanan. We didn't dive again too much into the story, but I think we will more so when we cover the next volume, which is the issues 7 through 12. So come back soon. We'll do that, and then we'll kind of just talk about mainly Kanan and his journey into that. In fact, it's been a long time since I read that, so I actually have like little memory about what happens in that comic. So it'd be exciting to get into that, and we'll get back to that. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Come back for more Beyond the Sagas, but of course on our YouTube channel, come back for more council sessions, Masters of the Order, and of course our weekly show Inside the Force, and some extra content that we may pop up there. I just put up a new trailer last week for the Skywalker saga. Did you see that, Hannah? I think you did, right?
Good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. That was it turned out a lot better than I thought, to be honest. So go check that out, and we will be back next time. Our next episode, we are actually going to be continuing our Star Wars comic series. That'll be volume 3, I think, for that one. So come back and check that out. Hannah, as always, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Truly appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. May the Force be with you.